I'm not going to, I'd like to have approximately 15 minutes as if in morning business for myself, if there's unanimous consent in that regard.
Is there objection?
I want to pay tribute to one of my staff members today. She recently left. She had a child and is being a mom and a civic activist. But she was a trusted advisor and, more than that, a dedicated patriot. Jane Treat, who's been with me since the earliest parts of 2004, is leaving to become a full-time mother. It's hard to lose her, but I understand the attraction as well as the commitment for a much more important job. She first came to work for me as a volunteer, fresh off her studies at Patrick Henry College. Since that time, she's played a key role on my Judiciary Committee through many intense legislative battles. She spent many long days in the Dirksen building pouring through briefing materials, preparing background notes for me, and negotiating on my behalf with other offices. She was there during the Roberts and Alito hearings, and for a time she also served as my interim chief counsel on the committee since I had no attorneys, and she was a non-attorney as well, which was a rare occasion. Her dedication has never wavered. The fact she worked the day she delivered her first child. She prepared negotiations that day for a bill that threatened the Second Amendment of the Constitution and how it interacted with our veterans. And we prevailed that day on no small part because of her efforts. One would be hard-pressed to find anyone who cherishes the Constitution and who knows its principles as well as Jane Treat. My legislative director jokes, although Jane did not actually write the Constitution, she is its fiercest defender. I would have to agree. For the past 2 years, and after the birth of her daughter, Jane has managed the correspondence team that works in my office, ensuring that every letter that reached my desk was treated with the utmost concern and professionalism. She cared for each constituent as if it were written but to a close relative or a neighbor, and in that she's done a terrific job. There's one last quality of Jane's that I commend to everyone in the room, and that's courage. Jane has a keen sense of right and wrong and will not allow an injustice to stand, whether it's policy-related or simply human. She fights for everybody. And when she's disagreeing, I'm laughing about this because when she disagrees with me, I'm always sure I'll hear about it later. And she'll come to the office and knock on the door and say, "Now we need to have a talk. You were wrong." And of course, I remind her that she wasn't elected and I was, and there is some interpretation to the Constitution. But the quality of having the courage to confront on things that are strongly held beliefs is a great quality that built our country, and she distinguishes herself in it. And that's in contrast to what usually happens in this town, is where we avoid difficult issues rather than confront them. Now, true to her principles, she will turn her attention towards her new community in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, where she'll be a full-time mom. It will not be long for sure before she's volunteering again for a cause close to her heart. Jane, we appreciate you. We thank you for your service, and we thank you for the modeling of your behavior. Now, Mr. President, I just want to spend a few minutes because what we've just gone through is a challenge to a process that's been ongoing for a long period of time. And the President knows I'm in agreement with sunshine. As a matter of fact, the President and I created the Transparency and Accountability Act so that everything we do gets published in terms of what we spend and how we spend it. And I agree we ought to be forthright with the reasons we hold individuals. But let's talk about what a hold is. A hold is saying you don't agree to a unanimous consent request to pass an individual out. In other words, what is a hold? What does it really say? It really says is, first of all, I either may have very significant concerns with this individual, or I may want to study this individual for a period of time in their record before I agree to it, or I may want to debate it the qualifications of the individual. And I agree on the transparency. But I think it's very important that we go back to say, not necessarily attune the motives. When I read the sign about those that are being held now versus in the Bush administration, I'm reminded that there were over 100 U.S. attorneys and marshals and 50 judges at the same time that were blocked in committee, so they couldn't even get to the floor at that time. So it depends on where you take the snapshot. There are lots of reasons to not agree to people being confirmed. And I have no problem with stating my reasons. And I'll publish my reasons. I don't have any problem even publishing them. But I'm not sure that we want to necessarily impugn the motives of somebody who takes advantage of that. And I agree with the senator from Missouri. I have no problems with putting it out in the open. But I did ask the question, and at some point in time, I think it would be wise for those that think that, is that we get a parliamentary ruling on what the rule really means. Because I think there is some discussion. And I don't doubt that the intent of what was passed was exactly what we intended. You put it out there. But I think that the interpretation or how it may be read is subject to some debate, and it'd be great to have a parliamentarian rule on that. Finally, I would say the other side of this issue, which comes back to things that are dear to my heart, is the fact that 94% of everything that passes in this body passes by that very process, unanimous consent. Unanimous consent that says we won't have a debate, we won't have an amendment, and things will pass because nobody objects to it passing. There's a real disadvantage for our country in that. And the disadvantage is this, is the American people never know what we're doing. They don't get to hear it. They don't get to hear the policy debates on both sides of the issue. And it's good that we work some things out, but if you watch the floor, what we know is 40% of the floor time spent in quorum calls. And the real issue that we're fighting is that moving is the reason the majority leader doesn't move them is because it takes time to move them, right? That's our problem. Time is our biggest enemy in the Senate. But yet that's exactly what our founders intended. They wanted it to be very difficult to change what they had put in place. And they set in motion this system that says we're going to make things thoughtful, under full consideration, with open debate. And we hear our colleagues all the time say, this is the greatest deliberative body in the world. It is, but not all of the deliberation goes on in the Senate floor. And I have no doubt that there are abuses on both sides. And I don't know what the motives are. When I hold somebody, I hold them because I think they're either not qualified for the job, I think they have a past record that would question their character, or I think, in fact, that I think they'll do a terrible job at the position, even if they are qualified. And I have the right, as an individual senator, to say, I'm not going to support that nomination. And so I'm all for moving and giving presidents what they want, but I'm not for doing it without the debate and the consideration that needs to be there. And so I'm very supportive of people standing up and say, while they're holding people, through the courtesy of the senator from Missouri, she didn't list one of the judges that I'm sure she was going to ask unanimous consent on, because I was the lone senator in the Judiciary Committee to vote against him. Now, I don't know who's holding him, but the fact is I don't think he's qualified. I want him to be debated. I want to have a chance to inform the American people on why I think he shouldn't be a circuit court judge. And that's my right. And to say we're just going to move him without a debate, without anything but a vote, I'm not going to do that on people who I think are not truly qualified. So it's not as straightforward as we think. I think we ought to think about how the process is working, that the leaders really do work on this process, and they move a lot of them forward. And I understand the frustration, and I'd be given the same speech if it was turned around. As a matter of fact, I have before. So I concur with my colleagues. I think sunlight is a wonderful thing. I think there's some times that where you have the problem, and I'll give you 3 specific examples. I publish all my holes. And under the Emmett Till bill, I was immediately accused of being a racist because I held the bill. Because I wanted it paid for. But as soon as I put out that I was holding the bill, I was accused of being a racist. So there are reasons for people to work behind the scenes to be able to work on things, to solve the problems with their concerns without it becoming public, so that you get the ultimate action, but don't impugn the integrity of people because they may not agree. So the potential of letting go of all this idea that we can't negotiate before we come and that we have to expose everything, what happened was the special interest groups attacked me ferociously. And except I ended up becoming the best friends with a very significant individual that drove that. And what has happened today is we still haven't done, because we didn't put the money in to pay for it, which is what I wanted. And there's still no special provision. There's still no action. And we passed it 2 years ago. Next thing was the Veterans Caregiver Act. I hated veterans because I thought we ought to pay for it, and I thought it ought to apply to every veteran that had that kind of injury that served this country. But yet, ferocious attack by the interest groups. I'm willing to take that heat. That comes with the job. But it's certainly not fair to put yourself in a position. I understand why other senators are not going to stand up and say every time why they're holding a bill when you see that kind of attack that comes after you. Same thing on breast cancer. Attack, sister-in-law, cousin, all with breast cancer. 2-time cancer survivor myself, but I hated breast cancer patients. So you can see why the idea of objecting to a unanimous consent and then immediately putting it out there will end up the attack of the special interest groups in this country, because you're trying to make something better, but your motives are impugned because you don't agree with the special interest that's running the bill in the first place. Or in the case of a nomination, the special interest of the Obama administration, that they think this is the individual. So I don't defend it. I put it out. I'm willing to take that, but I understand that that's not always the best way to go to get something accomplished, because you end up burning a lot of energy defending yourself on something that you're totally innocent of in the first place. You want a different result for a different reason, but that's never gets covered. So I think this morning's been great. I think it's interesting that we've had this debate. And my hope is that we'll have people that will stand up and speak and put up why they believe what they believe, fight for the principles they believe in. I think I can defend my principles to the hilt. And I think in front of 100 common sense folks in this country, I can get 85 of them to side with me. So I'm not afraid to do that. And I'm willing to be honest and transparent and straightforward. But the impugning of motives really worries me on this, because it has nothing to do with not wanting President Obama to have his people. It has to do in many instances with people who are truly unqualified, or truly are divergent on what their past has been and versus what they say. And those are legitimate reasons to have debate on individuals that are going to serve function in this government. So with that, I would yield back the floor and thank the President for his consideration.